Welcome to Steadfast Hope, the teaching ministry of Pastor Trevon and Elder Quinn Gross. This broadcast is designed to help you remain rooted and grounded in the hope of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And now, here's today's message.
And when we talk about Jubilee, because really Jubilee for this church began back in September when the prophetic word came forth that we were now in Jubilee and a season of miracles had begun in our midst. It really began there. Now, when you looked at everything in the natural, everything looked the same. But something shifted in the supernatural. And we have a choice to either align ourselves with the supernatural, which is the world that cannot be seen with the natural eye, or be limited by the world we can see. And I want to challenge you to be convinced and convicted that the world that we cannot see is more real and more powerful than the world we can see. Turn to Colossians chapter 1. Start with verse 15, talking about Jesus Christ. Colossians chapter 1, starting with verse 15, says, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created through him and for him." If we're going to flow with the Jubilee blessing, we have to understand that God is not limited by what we can see. Because he operates in a world that our natural eye cannot see. And in that world, there are no limitations. In that world, there is no watch. So when God spoke at the beginning of creation that man and woman were blessed, it was irrevocable. But many of us, we sit around trying to disqualify ourselves. If I were only the right color, I'd go further in the world. If I was only the right gender, I'd go further in the world. If I only had the right parents, I'd go further in the world. If I'd only gone to the right school, I'd go further in the world. God doesn't care about any of that. Because before there was schools, there was God. Before people could get from the wrong side of the track to the right side of the track, God was still making things happen for people. And so we've got to stop being limited by what we can see. We've got to start connecting with the world that we cannot see. So how do I connect with that world that I cannot see? One way. And this is another way that we miss it, because we connect with that world through our words. Turn to John chapter 6. Do I want John? Is that what I want? Yes. John chapter 6. Verse 63. John 6:63. "It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh profits nothing." The flesh is what you can see. The flesh is this human part of us. And it profits us nothing. The words that I speak to you are spirit, and they are life. Jesus said, listen, if you rely on your flesh will always lead you to bankruptcy. He said, but the words that I speak, they are spirit and they are life. And we know the words that Jesus spoke are the same words that God spoke, and when God spoke, stuff was created. Come on, Genesis chapter 1, when the earth was without form and void and darkness hovered over the face of the earth, then God said, let there be light, and so the way that we get in touch with the supernatural world that can change the natural world is that we open our mouths and declare what God said. And when we say what God said, it gets us in touch with the supernatural world. And it either licenses God to operate on our behalf, or it licenses the devil to operate against us. And it's all conditioned by what comes out of our mouths. And if we want to see the blessing of Jubilee manifested in our lives individually, because see, Jubilee, it is for Hope Cathedral as a church, but it is also for every person who is connected with this ministry. You ought to see Jubilee in your life, in your house, in your career, in your bank account. You ought to see Jubilee, and you ought to expect Jubilee to manifest in your life. But you'll never get there so long as you are not receiving what God says by faith.
Welcome to Steadfast Hope, the teaching ministry of Pastor Trevon and Elder Quinn Gross. This broadcast is designed to help you remain rooted and grounded in the hope of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And now, here's today's message.